A word of warning. My true crime is intended for adults. We may discuss disturbing cases, so viewer discretion is advised. Thank you. Hello, fanatics. Welcome to another episode of my true crime. I am working on Aussie from Diamond Art Studio, and today I want to talk about a case that has so many twists and turns and is absolutely heartbreaking and tragic. This is the case of Susan Powell. She is an American missing person from West Valley City in Utah, whose disappearance and presumed murder, as well as the subsequent investigation and events, garnered national media attention. Susan's husband, Joshua, was named a person of interest in the investigation into her disappearance, but was never charged. On the 5th of February 2012, he then did an atrocious act that would never give Susan's family the answers they so rightfully deserved. So let's delve into this case and unfold the tragedies that would forever change the lives of those around this family. I am going to start with Josh. He was born on the 20th of January in 1976 to Stephen and Terica Powell in Washington. Joshua's parents had a dysfunctional marriage, caused in large part by Stephen's disaffection with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the LDS Church. According to divorce filings by Terica, in 1992, Stephen shared pornography with Joshua and his two brothers and refused to teach or enforce limits on certain behaviours. As a teenager, Joshua, the son, allegedly killed gerbils belonging to one of his sisters, threatened his mother with a butcher knife, and also attempted suicide on at least one occasion. In 1998, Joshua was living in Seattle as a student at the University of Washington. It was here where Joshua began his first relationship with a young woman named Catherine, whom he also met at a local LDS church. After the two moved in together, they moved into an apartment. Joshua became possessive towards Catherine. Quote, he would have restrictions and limitations on what I could and couldn't do when it came to my family. If I was going to visit them, he had to come too. I couldn't go by myself. End quote. When Catherine visited a friend in Utah without Joshua, she decided not to return to Seattle and broke up with him over the phone. Joshua met Susan Cox, a classmate at his LDS Church Institute of Religion course, during a dinner party at his apartment in November 2000. The two began a relationship and eventually married in the Portland, Oregon temple in April 2001. Joshua had a bachelor's degree in business and worked for a number of different companies over the years, while Susan, a trained cosmetologist, took a job with Wells Fargo Investments after the family's relocation to West Valley City in Utah. For a brief period following their wedding, Joshua and Susan lived at Stephen Powell's home. This is Joshua's dad. You know, the creepy guy. Okay, so they lived with him. Unbeknownst to Susan, her father-in-law, Stephen, had developed an obsessive infatuation with her, which was only inflamed by their close proximity. Stephen followed Susan around the house with a camcorder, used a small mirror to spy on her while she used the bathroom, stole her underwear from her laundry, read her journals, and even posted love songs online under a pseudonym. In 2003, Stephen confessed his feelings to a stunned Susan, who rejected him. The encounter was inadvertently captured by Stephen's camcorder microphone. Joshua and Susan moved out of state soon after, so Susan could distance herself from the creepy dad. Susan's journal entries and email correspondence indicated that there was trouble in the marriage. There was tension with Joshua over his refusal to attend church services with his family, and over his continued contact with Stephen, despite at this point he is still being creepy and weird with Susan, and Susan saying, look, stop talking to your dad, because he won't stop harassing me. Susan's friends also pointed to Joshua's extravagant spending habits and to his, quote, extremely controlling behaviour towards his wife. Joshua filed for bankruptcy in 2007, declaring over $200,000 in debts. Susan recorded a video in July 2008 surveying property damage she attributed to Joshua, and wrote a secret will that included the statements, quote, I want it documented that there is extreme turmoil in our marriage. If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one. End quote. Side note here, it brings tears to my eyes because how terrified must you be to write a note saying, if it looks like an accident, can you look into it a little bit deeper because my husband might do something. How terrified must you be? On the morning of December 6, 2009, Susan, Charles and Braden attended church services. A neighbour visited them at home in the afternoon, leaving at around 5 p.m. This was the last time Susan was seen by someone outside of the Powell household. At first, the entire Powell family was reported missing on December 7th by relatives. Josh's mother, Terica, and sister Jennifer, I believe this is Joshua's sister, not the mum's sister, went looking for the family at their house shortly after being informed that the children had not been dropped off at daycare that morning. They called the police when they failed to make contact with Joshua and Susan. The police broke into the house, fearing that the family might be victims of carbon monoxide poisoning. They found no one inside, but noticed 2 box fans blowing at a wet spot on the couch. Strange. Susan did not show up at work on December 7th. Her purse, wallet, and identification were all found at the house. Her mobile phone was later found in the family's only vehicle, a Chrysler Town and Country minivan that Joshua had been using. Later that day, at around 5 p.m, Joshua returned home with the 2 boys and was taken to the police station for questioning. He claimed that he had left Susan sleeping at home shortly after midnight on December the 7th, and he had taken his boys on a camping trip to Simpson Springs in western Utah. Went camping at midnight. Now, I'm a camper. I enjoy camping. I have never left at midnight randomly. Police visited Simpson Springs on December 10th, but found no evidence of the campsite that Joshua had described. They also found it suspicious that Joshua would take his young boys out camping in blizzard conditions after midnight when he was scheduled to go to work just hours later. Joshua had not told his boss that he would not be in that day and explained to police it was because he thought it was Sunday, not Monday. Yep, he actually did. Upon searching the Powell residence on December the 9th, investigators found traces of Susan's blood on the floor, life insurance policies on Susan for $1.5 million, and a handwritten letter from Susan expressing fear for her life. DNA test results released in 2013 matched one blood sample with Susan, while the other sample was determined to have come from an unknown male contributor. In August 2012, West Valley Police released documents showing that Joshua took actions that were regarded as highly suspicious following Susan's disappearance. He's already suspicious. He's been suspicious. However, he then liquidated Susan's retirement accounts, cancelled her regular appointments with a chiropractor. He withdrew his children from daycare. He had also previously spoken to co-workers about how to hide a body in an abandoned mine shaft in the western Utah desert. Police interviewed the couple's eldest son, Charlie, who confirmed that the camping trip Joshua described took place. However, unlike Dad, he stated that Susan had gone with them, but she did not come back. Weeks after her disappearance, a teacher reported that Charlie had claimed that his mother was dead. Furthermore, Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy, claimed that while at daycare several months after the disappearance, Braden drew a picture of a van with 3 people in it and told the carers that, quote, "Mummy was in the trunk." Investigators informed the media that they planned to question Joshua again and subpoenaed all footage and interviews, aired and unaired, of Joshua from the local TV stations. On December 14th, Joshua retained an attorney in connection with the investigation, and police said that he grew increasingly uncooperative. A few days later, he took his sons to stay with Stephen for the holidays, his dad. By December 24, Joshua was considered a person of interest in the investigation. I mean, really. On January the 6th, 2010, he returned with his brother, Michael, to pack up the family's belongings, indicating that he was going to be moving permanently. Joshua then moved into his dad's house, basically. He was living with his 2 sons, his dad, 2 brothers, and a sister. And he was kind of saying that he was going to rent out his house in Utah. Soon afterwards, the website susanpowell.org was launched, described, quote, as the official website of Susan Powell. The site's anonymous entries defended Joshua as the victim of a smear campaign by Susan's family, his estranged sister Jennifer, and the LDS Church. Additional posts also speculated that Susan's disappearance was connected to that of, I don't know how to say this name, but Stephen Ketcher, a former journalist who vanished the same week as Susan, and the 2 had run off to Brazil together. Joshua and Stephen were widely believed to have written these posts. In late 2010, both men claimed that Susan had abandoned her family due to mental illness and that she had left with another man. Susan's family rejected those claims as being, quote, unsupported by any evidence. It is so insulting, isn't it? Like, your child is missing, you suspect that the husband has done something. You've got your grandchildren, and then dealing with all of that trauma, they're just slinging mud all the time. Investigators' scrutiny extended to Stephen upon learning from a family friend that he had been obsessed with his son's wife. Computer images seized from his house in 2010 turned up 4,500 images of Susan taken without her knowledge, including close-ups of specific body parts. Police also turned their attention to Michael, the brother, after learning that he sold his broken-down Ford Taurus to a wrecking yard in Oregon shortly after Susan's disappearance, and had later ordered satellite images of the lot. When police found the car, a sniffer dog indicated that a decomposing human body had been in the trunk. DNA tests of the car proved inconclusive. On September the 14th, 2011, Utah Utah authorities discovered a possible gravesite while searching Topaz Mountain, a desert area that Joshua had frequented as a campsite. There were signs of recent soil disturbance and shoveling, but after digging down a few feet, police were unable to find any remains in spite of careful sifting of the soil. Relations between the Powells, so Joshua, Stephen, and Susan's mum and dad and her family became increasingly hostile. After a police raid in their home in 2011, both Joshua and Stephen spoke to major news outlets regarding journals that Susan had allegedly written about the relationship between Stephen, the dad, and herself. Stephen claimed that he and Susan had been falling in love prior to her disappearance, and he cited the content of the journals as evidence to support his theory that she was mentally unstable and could have run away with another man. There's just one problem with this theory, is that her journals were written when Susan was a teenager. Definitely wasn't him. A judge issued a permanent injunction forbidding Joshua and Stephen from publishing any material from Susan's journals, ordering the pair to either return or destroy any journals already published. On September the 22nd, Stephen was arrested on charges of child pornography after police found evidence that he had secretly videotaped numerous women, including young girls and including Susan. John Long, Assistant Attorney General for Washington State, said that Joshua, his son, was a, quote, subject in the child pornography investigation. A friend of Stephen claimed that he was preoccupied with pornography and, quote, was hung up on Susan sexually, end quote. Turns your stomach. It's absolutely disgusting. Chuck Cox, this is Susan's dad, filed for custody of the children the day after Stephen was arrested. A Washington court eventually granted Chuck temporary custody of the boys, ruling that Joshua would have to move out of Stephen's home if he wanted to regain custody. Joshua rented a house in South Hill, but authorities later alleged that he had never actually moved into that house, merely making it appear as if he had to satisfy the court's instructions while continuing to reside at Stephen's home. In late September 2011, Joshua's sister Jennifer stated that she believed Joshua, quote, was responsible for his wife Susan's disappearance. His other sister also had been suspicious of him. However, she later withdrew her suspicions and felt that Joshua had been unduly harassed by the investigation. By this time, West Valley City had spent more than $500,000 on the case. On September 28th, Mayor Mike Winder indicated that he felt the case was worth the expense, stating, quote, "We feel that we are getting to that tipping point where we have more evidence than we've had in the past 2 years," end quote, and that the case is moving forward. In late 2011, Joshua underwent a series of court-ordered evaluations in Washington. The evaluations by James Manley determined that Joshua had adequate parenting skills, a steady employment history, no criminal record, or history of domestic violence. However, Manley also raised issues concerning the ongoing criminal investigations, Joshua's failure to admit normal personal shortcomings, his overbearing behaviour with his sons, and his persistent defensiveness and paranoia attributed to the police and media attention, in conjunction with underlying narcissistic traits. The initial recommendation was for Joshua to have visitation with his sons several times a week, supervised by a social worker. In the last week of January 2012, Utah police discovered about 400 images of child pornography, bestiality, and incest on a computer seized from the Powell home. This turns out to be irrelevant. Susan bought a second-hand computer, and it was the other owner that was doing this, so it was deemed irrelevant because it was second-hand, and it was proved them searches belonged to the previous owner that Susan obviously had no idea about. I mean, I wouldn't know, but yeah, so we just move on from that. It does go on about that for a little bit, but that's what happened. It was nothing to do with Joshua or anything. So Joshua was recommended to receive a more thorough psychosexual evaluation and polygraph test, but Manley suggested no change in the visitation schedule with the boys. Meanwhile, Michael, his brother, established Google Sites page which claimed that Susan's parents were abusing and neglecting the boys in collusion with the child welfare authorities, and that West Valley City Police had both mishandled the investigation into Susan's disappearance and were harassing Joshua. Lawyers for the Cox family disputed the allegations, and Google removed the site after a few days due to terms of use violations. On February 5th, 2012, social worker Elizabeth Griffin Hall called 911 after taking Charlie and Braden to a supervised visit at Joshua's house in South Hill. This social worker was supposed to monitor the visit between Joshua and the boys. She reported that he grabbed them and would not let her through the door. Soon thereafter, the house exploded, killing Joshua, Charlie, and Braden. Local authorities treated the case as a double murder-suicide, saying that the act appeared to have been deliberate. When authorities notified Stephen, who was in jail, Josh's dad, he, quote, didn't seem very upset by the news, but was angry towards authorities who notified him, end quote. 2 weeks later, Stephen invoked his Fifth Amendment right not to answer questions regarding Susan's disappearance. Susan's family and others have stated they believe that Stephen knew what actually happened to Susan. He was convicted of voyeurism charges in May 2012 in a trial which largely skirted the issue of Susan's case. After a relatively brief investigation, officials confirmed that the explosion had been deliberately planned. The official cause of death for Joshua and the two boys was determined to be carbon monoxide poisoning. This is a little upsetting here. I mean, it's all upsetting, but this shocked me. The coroner also noted that both children had significant chopping injuries on the head and neck. A hatchet was recovered near Joshua's body, and investigators believe that he attacked the boys with it before being overwhelmed by smoke and fumes. The fire investigation also found 2 5-gallon cans of gasoline on the premises, as well as evidence as the gasoline had been spread throughout the house. Friends and relatives of Joshua told authorities that he had contacted them by email minutes before the incident to say goodbye. Some of them, including his local bishop, received instructions for finding his money and shutting off his utilities. Records also showed that Joshua had withdrawn $7,000 from his bank account and donated his children's toys and books to local charities a day before the incident. Joshua named Michael as the main beneficiary of his life insurance policy. Charles and Braden were buried at Woodbine Cemetery, which also contains a memorial for their mother. Joshua's remains were cremated. On February the 11th, 2013, approximately 1 year after the death of Joshua and his sons, Michael took his own life in Minnesota, where he had moved for graduate school. He jumped from the roof of a parking garage. Police had questioned Michael several times in 2012 after discovering his abandoned Ford at the wrecking yard. Michael was evasive about why he left the car at that location. Utah authorities have since said that they believe that Joshua and Michael were accomplices in the murder of Susan. In February 2013, an interview with Manley, who conducted those evaluations on Joshua, acknowledged his suspicions that Joshua was involved in his wife's disappearance. However, he did not mention these suspicions in his report because they were beyond the scope of his duties and because Joshua had not been charged with any wrongdoing. On May the 21st, 2013, West Valley City Police announced that they had closed the active investigation into Susan's disappearance. I'm not going to go into that. Joshua's sister Jennifer wrote a book. I mean, great, I'm not giving credit to that. In March 2015, Chuck won a protracted court battle with Terica over the control of Susan's estate. Yes, Joshua's mum had control over Susan's estate. How messed up is that? Terica has fought to have Susan declared legally dead to collect her life insurance. But thankfully, Susan's dad ultimately gained full control of the estate. They also sued Washington Department of Social and Health Services, claiming that the agency prioritised Joshua's parental rights over the safety of the boys and facilitated their deaths. While a lower court initially ruled against the Coxes, the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit reversed this ruling and allowed the case to proceed to trial in January 2019. Susan's family also pressured state lawmakers in Washington and Utah to pass bills that would restrict or block visitation rights for parents being investigated for murder. How insane is this? They're saying, please, can you help us sort visitation rights or restrict or block for people suspected of murder. It's insane. It should be automatic. Stephen Powell was released from prison on the 11th of July in 2017 after serving a total of 7 years. He died of natural causes. July, a year later. Susan remains a missing person, but given the fates of her sons, it is widely believed that she was murdered by her husband Joshua. There were calls as of March 2018 to have her declared dead, with the cause being homicide. How horrific is this case? It's absolutely tragic. Her parents never got any answers. They have no idea where she is. And let's face it, she's no longer living. Absolutely heartbreaking and tragic. And the whole Powell family, the mum, the dad, Joshua, Michael, if he was involved. I don't think he was involved in the murder. I think he might have got roped in the clean up of it all. But there you go. This is the very, very sad and tragic case of Susan. Absolutely heartbreaking. Thank you for keeping me company. As always, please do leave your thoughts and your comments down below. Stay safe out there. Bye.